from Texas to Alabama. And
virtually all television news reports showed totally destroyed homes in New Orleans. But few reported the all-important detail that 150 square miles of buildings and infrastructure were utterly destroyed. That is an area twice the size of the District of Columbia. Block after block, mile after mile, all that the eye sees is devastation. At least 25% of the city's homes will have to be bulldozed. That means 100,000 homes will not be rebuilt, which in turn means that approximately 400,000 people cannot return home, ever. Consequently, with the daily media not having put the enormity of this calamity in perspective, the rest of the nation still has no accurate vision of what actually occurred in New Orleans. In every neighborhood, one can still see the depth of each house in the sea, which was created by the failure of the levees. The height of the multicolored water line, clearly visible on each house, is the only perspective one gets of the Armageddon which occurred here. Moreover, since poorer communities are usually in low-lying areas, those homes were submerged most of all under the sea of governmental incompetence and pork barrel politics.
I was sick. I had a heart attack.
They had dogs swimming across there, and I kept looking for them.
What's happened to your life? Where are you going to go from here?
I don't know anything.
Oh, but it's hard to move back home when you ain't got nothing to move back home to.
Therefore, the great majority of the 400,000 New Orleans residents who are unable to ever return are the poor, the old, and the sick. Whether by design or not, the poorer segment of the population has thus been victimized far more than the middle and upper income classes. Yet, the daily media does not mention this shameful detail either. Instead, the daily media simply broadcasts totally false utterances by governmental officials. Weeks after New Orleans Mayor Ray Nagin claimed on national news that, quote, New Orleans is slowly coming back to life, unquote, there was still no food, no water, no electricity, and no residents in 90% of the city. Yet, the national news media inaccurately reported the irrelevant utterances of yet another incompetent politician without challenge.
I believe he's doing a really fine job.
There are endless more details which major news networks have been negligent in reporting. For instance, bodies are still being removed from homes 2 months after a flood. There is still not a single store open in 90% of the city.
Yesterday we had a group came out and fed 500 hamburgers and some odd 100 hot dogs to people in the neighborhood. And one thing we saw that was very normal is a bus stopped right in the middle of St. Charles Avenue. The bus driver gets off, comes over, gets a hamburger, and gets back on the bus and takes off.
There are still no hotels available anywhere near New Orleans for residents to base their house cleaning and repairing operations from.
Well, I have an apartment across the river. My boss, but I don't know how that's going to work out. I don't know.
There is still no electricity, water, traffic lights, nor gasoline in 90% of the city, 2 months after the nightmare began. The greatest disaster in American history has been, and still continues to be, misreported by the daily national media.
He worked for the trash company. So when he came, he called me back and told me that my dog had been shot. Said they hadn't shot my dog. Said the back door was open and they hadn't shot my dog. So when my son and them came, they must have shot and thrown her right here. She was laying right there. All the side of her face was shot. You know, she was a great big old, she was a big dog.
So you left your dog up in the top.
I left my dog up in the top.
And you found your dog down on the bottom with its head blown off,
right,
basically.
Right. I put her in there, locked up in there with enough food and water. So I had enough food and water to last almost a whole month for her.
Let me ask you, were there water stains up there?
Where, up there?
Where she was that filled with water? Did they?
No, it wasn't filled with water, but my...
so they could have just opened the door and closed the door and left her in there. She She had food, she had water, and there was
She had food,
and it wasn't flooded yet.
No, it wasn't.
And here you are back. Here you are back in your own home.
Hey, I'm not back. I'm just back cleaning it up.
But if your dog were here,
oh yeah, my dog was there.
right?
My dog.
Your dog
right
would be
there.
alive.
Oh
You would have
yeah.
reclaimed your dog. That's the whole point.
Yes,
That is your
no.
point. Instead of
Yeah.
finding your dog dead where it was safe. It was safe. It
Yeah.
had food. It had water. It
It
was
had
not
food,
flooded
it
out.
had water.
They
I mean,
burst
she
into
was a
your
big
house
old-
and then they shot your dog.
Right.
To add final insult to injury, during the critical days after the sea engulfed the entire city of New Orleans, residents were forced by rescue teams to leave their companion animal family members behind.
We could not evacuate with 2 of our dogs, and we had to leave them with food and water, thinking that we would be able to get back, of which we did, to take care of them. But we had to leave. We were told that we had to absolutely get out.
And
so
where
we
did you
had
leave
no
them?
choice. By that time, we couldn't take the dogs.
Where did you leave them?
We had to leave them in the back on a high ground with food and water. And we were not allowed back in for days and days, much longer than an animal could survive. And we did not have access to any services. And as soon as we could, we contacted the SPCA and notified them that we did have animals here. And we saw during the rescue that we were operating, this was before the National Guard or military came. Many older and elderly people, there were mostly elderly people who did not want to leave because they knew they had to leave their pets, and they were alone with their pet, and their pet is like a family member to them, and they were not going to leave without their pet. And so they were very unsure as we came every day to deliver supplies and tried to convince them to please leave, that we would even take their pet and bring them to high ground, and they refused. They just adamantly refused. And then toward the end, after several days, some of the people realized that it was hopeless, and they decided that they would leave. And one woman in particular, of whom I spoke with you about, had brought me into her home, where we drove up with our canoe and showed me her cats. And she lived there alone, and she was a very fine lady, and her cats were her life. And it was as though she was saying to me, "These are my children, please take care of them." It was very sad.
In the aftermath of this tragedy, the authorities' short-sightedness and incompetence has now created a secondary public hazard, with the city of New Orleans now being overrun by hundreds of packs of dogs, which must now be trapped for years to come. Naturally, the media has failed to report this nightmare situation as well.
But the crisis is now.
One cannot help but wonder if the Potomac River was contained by 24-inch thick walls of levees. Would Congress have removed the funding for repair and reinforcement of the levees for the 20 years prior during House-Senate budget negotiations? We suspect not. What do you think?